Why did Jungkook suddenly come to Jimin's house without anyone knowing? What made Jimin immediately open his voice in front of everyone? Is this the end of their friendship or the beginning of something much deeper? Watch until the end, leave your comments, like if you're also surprised, and subscribe so as not to miss the next hottest news. Did you guys see that? Or maybe you also had time to wonder why the atmosphere is so different lately between Jungkook and Jimin. No one could really answer until one moment caught on camera accidentally shook the entire fandom. Jungkook, unscheduled, unannounced, appears quietly in front of Jimin's house. No staff, no manager, no one knows. Then, in just a matter of hours, Jimin finally spoke up, with a quivering voice and an expression that made armies around the world hold their breath. What exactly happened that night? It all started with a cryptic post on a social media platform belonging to one of Jimin's neighbors, who thought they were just photographing a Jungkook-like figure in a narrow alley leading to the idol's residence. There were no lights on, only a faint recorded sound of slow steps. Many thought it was just someone who happened to look alike. But when other photos and videos began to appear from different points of view of local residents who turned out to recognize the figure, a riddle began to form. Black clothes, masks, hats, everything is typical of Jungkook when he wants to avoid attention. But why hide? The issue began to grow wild. Some say that Jungkook and Jimin had been at loggerheads some time ago, and that Jungkook's arrival was an attempt to reconcile. Others speculated that something top secret was being discussed by the two, something that should not be known to the public, not even the agency. However, what really changed everything was Jimin's statement the next day. In a live streaming session that was originally only intended to greet fans, Jimin suddenly stopped, looked down for a long time, then said, "I know everything has been talked about a lot. So let me explain myself." The sentence stopped seconds as if frozen. Hundreds of thousands of viewers in the live immediately flooded the comments column. Not a few wrote that they cried just because Jimin's tone sounded different, calm, but full of emotion. And from there everything begins to unfold, although not in its entirety. Jimin didn't mention names, but everyone knew who he meant. He said that someone who meant a lot to his life, someone who had been with him from the beginning, came that night under very different circumstances than usual. Not as an idol, not as BTS's Jungkook, but as a man who lost his way and needed shelter. "I'm not going to go into details," Jimin said, "because I respect that person's privacy and feelings. But what happened that night was that moment, changed the way I look." Instantly, everyone wanted to know what really happened between them. Reports from a former HYB security crew member, who did not want to be named, said that a week before the incident, Jungkook had missed several important meetings. He's even said to have turned down several big advertising offers for no apparent reason. "There's pressure, a lot of pressure," the source said, "and I think he needs space." But no one expected that he would go to Jimin, let alone secretly like that. Some fans began to compile a very detailed chronology based on timestamps from social media, public CCTV, to Jimin's live shows. They discovered that Jungkook's arrival at Jimin's house came just hours after a major decision was announced by HYB regarding an internal restructuring involving BTS individual promotion schedules. Is this just a coincidence? More surprisingly, in one of the live fragments, there was a voice in the background that was suspected to be Jungkook's voice. Although it was faint, fans who knew his voice well noticed it immediately. Some even managed to improve the audio quality and realize the recorded short sentences. "Thank you for not rejecting me." A simple sentence, but for many, it describes something very deep, a hurt feeling that has finally found shelter. After that, Jimin disappeared for 2 days. No updates, no posts, no public appearances. But as soon as he reappeared, his smile looked different, like the smile of someone who knew that the burden on his heart was slightly reduced, but the wound inside was still open. He began to talk more about the importance of mental health and support between friends. Despite not mentioning Jungkook directly, everyone knew the direction of the conversation. At the same time, speculation arose that HYB was getting sultry with rumors that were developing too quickly. A leaked document, which has yet to be verified, shows that there are internal instructions to dampen excessive narratives on social media regarding interactions between members. But the attempt sparked even more suspicion. Is there something bigger being covered? Not long after, Taehyung uploaded an old photo of the three of them, himself, Jimin, and Jungkook, with a short caption, "Everything will be fine." Is this a message to the fans? or a reminder of both? Whatever it was, the army took this as a symbol that the relationship between them was still strong, despite the storm. However, the reality that came next was much more surprising. A few days after all this happened, a cafe worker who was not far from Jimin's house confessed that he saw Jungkook come back, this time during the day, without disguising himself, and only briefly. He just sat in the car for a few minutes, then left again. His face looked heavy, like he was thinking about something big. This story also adds to the list of mysteries. What is unfinished? Why did Jungkook come back but didn't enter the house? Jimin, in an interview with a Japanese magazine a month later, gave his most explicit statement so far. When asked what home meant to him, he replied, "Home is where you feel most secure. And sometimes, home is not a place, it's a person." An answer that left thousands of fans in tears. After reading it. As time went on, fans began to realize that the relationship between BTS members was not just about work, but something much deeper. They are brothers who grew up together in the public spotlight, faced invisible pressures, and had to stand their ground even though their hearts might be breaking. In this context, Jungkook's quiet arrival at Jimin's house is not just an ordinary visit. It was a signal, a scream without sound. And Jimin's response was a rare form of affection in the industry. Now, when you see them standing together again on stage, maybe you'll see more than just an appearance. You will see the story behind their eyes. The story of how one night full of silence can shake everything, and how one meeting can save a heart that is on the verge of drowning. And the question now is this the end of their story? Or is it just the beginning of a more honest and wounded chapter that can finally heal? But the reality was much deeper and more disturbing than the army had imagined. That night, it wasn't just about Jungkook coming to find peace. It was a night when everything almost collapsed. Several inside sources who declined to be named revealed that Jungkook's arrival at Jimin's home was a form of escape from the internal conflict that took place behind the agency's walls. A conflict that was never revealed to the public. The source even mentioned that there was tremendous pressure on Jungkook to accept certain contracts that required him to perform in solo projects that were contrary to the principles he had always held. He feels trapped, locked up in a decision he didn't make on his own. And the only person he could trust, the only person who wouldn't sell his story to the media, was Jimin. According to The Insider, Jungkook had stated that he was considering quitting all public activities for an indefinite period. In fact, he had revealed to one of the staff that he felt he was losing himself. "I just want to be a human being, not a comfort machine," he said in an internal voice recording that was leaked in limited circles. But the most surprising thing was what happened a few hours before his arrival at Jimin's house. Jungkook was involved in a heated confrontation with one of HYB's senior representatives. The atmosphere in the meeting heated up until the sound of banging was heard from behind the glass door of the meeting room. No one knew exactly what the conversation was about, but after the meeting, Jungkook left without saying anything. Not to the dorm, not to the house, but directly to Jimin's house. In such a situation, is the visit really just a missed meeting? Or is there something darker that no one knows about? And to make things even more confusing, the next day after Jimin went live and gave a vague statement, BTS's official account actually uploaded an old video of the seven of them with a strange caption, "We will never really understand everything." The post sparked speculation that something much bigger was being covered up, something the members themselves might not even agree with. Some longtime fans have begun to reiterate old conspiracy theories about the existence of silent contracts that suppress the creative freedom of BTS members, especially in the context of their personal relationships. This theory is further corroborated by the behavior of Jimin and Jungkook, who have been seen less and less together in public over the past year. Many initially thought that it was just because of each other's busy lives, but after this incident, a bolder assumption arose. Could they really have been separated on purpose? And if it's true that they were separated, who arranged all that? Tensions escalated when one of BTS' former management staff, who now lives abroad, made a cryptic post on his personal account that was quickly deleted. Jungkook should have spoken, but he still chose silence because of the promise he once made. Even if it hurts. There was no name, no context, but everyone knew who it was for. It didn't take long for ARMY to dig into the account and find some traces of old conversations that showed his closeness to Jungkook's personal team during the Love Yourself era. The post lasted only an hour before disappearing. But it was enough to fuel speculation that Jungkook's silence was not because he didn't want to talk. but because there was something or someone he was still protecting. And if so, who is he protecting? Is that Jimin? Is that himself? Or something bigger than both? Not stopping there, the news also emerged that after the night of the visit, Jimin was called by one of the main directors of HYB. Their conversation was never made public, but one thing that was the subject of great debate in the fan community was Jimin's change of expression in one of the interviews the next day. He looks more tense, more cautious. In fact, when one of the reporters asked directly about his interaction with Jungkook, he only replied briefly, "We talk as friends." But the expression on his face did not at all harmonize with the answer. If they were just talking as friends, why did Jimin look so emotional? Why does Jungkook come at night secretly? Why does all this seem to be happening behind shadows that have never been illuminated? And more than that, why didn't the agency give an official statement to reduce speculation? Is it because they know if one truth is opened, there will be another worse truth exposed? Another controversial fact is a report from one of the vocal coaches who worked with them, who said that in recent months, Jungkook seemed to lose his spirit in his training sessions. He is often silent, staring blankly, sometimes not even finishing the session even though there is no urgent schedule. The coach says that this is not the Jungkook he knows, someone who is usually at his best in everything he does. He looked like someone who is trying to survive, he said. And in the midst of all this speculation, fans are beginning to realize that there are more than just rumors. There are wounds that are being hidden. The truth is buried. And maybe there's a decision to be made, even if it hurts. Could it be that Jungkook's arrival that night was the last apology? Or is it just a desire to let go of something you've been holding on to for so long? And was Jimin, in the tears he endured, the only one who understood what Jungkook's silence meant all along? One thing is certain, after that night, nothing will ever look the same again. Jimin's eyes spoke more than words. Jungkook's steps felt heavier than ever. And the fans, who have been silent witnesses for years, are now faced with the fact that even in a world as full of glitter as the K-pop industry, there are sorrows that cannot be covered with smiles on stage. The question now is no longer about what happened that night. Rather, how much more do we not know yet? And how much do they still hide? When the public began to get used to the smiles displayed on the screens and polite gestures in every live broadcast, they forgot that behind all that, there was a human being struggling with an indivisible wound. The night that Jungkook comes quietly to Jimin's house is the night where the line between image and reality begins to crack. But as no one expected, the crack opened a loophole for a secret that had been locked to death by agreement and loyalty. A few days after that moment, a former employee in HYB's content production department, who resigned a year ago, uploaded something that was immediately deleted just 2 minutes later. A screenshot of an internal document that mentions selective interaction protocols between members in periods of high public pressure. This phrase caused a stir. What does selective interaction mean? Why should it be arranged in such a way? And why is it precisely the interaction between Jungkook and Jimin that seems to be systematically obscured all this time? Not a few began to ask, has the agency really been trying to control not only the work schedule of the members, but also their personal relationships? Is the closeness that has been exhibited on the screen only part of the narrative that has been polished all out in order to maintain a certain image? And if true, how many of them are already hurt by being forced to separate emotion from their public existence? Some former trainees from HYB Academy mentioned that from the beginning they had been given directions that the closeness between the members should be visible in front of the camera. But it should not be too deep in real life if it does not get the approval of the management. One of them said bitterly, "If you get too close to someone, and they think it harms the narrative of the group, you will be quietly kept away." This statement sparked speculation that Jungkook and Jimin may be targets of the same policy. One fan who follows the members' personal activities through public movement data even compiled a map of time and place since the past year. She pointed out a significant decline in their togetherness, both in their personal and professional schedules, starting from an unspecified incident backstage at a major concert abroad. The concert was billed as a moment of clash of principles between the members, and of all the speculation, it was Jungkook and Jimin who were always at the center of attention. Furthermore, the most surprising rumor that circulated on a limited basis was about a vocal recording incident that was never made public, in which Jungkook and Jimin allegedly argued with each other emotionally. In the clip, which reportedly only circulated in a small circle of technical staff, a man's voice is heard pleading, "Don't ask me to pretend anymore." and answered in another voice, "I also got sick, but I stayed for your sake." The veracity of this clip has never been verified, but it is enough to make one part of the fandom believe that their relationship has been much more complex than what has been shown. Then, as the public calmed down, the agency abruptly issued an official statement that was too diplomatic to calm the storm. The statement did not mention Jungkook, did not mention Jimin, but spoke of artist privacy and support for emotional health. Too neutral language for too turbulent a situation. Language that implies that they want this to just evaporate. But the problem is that the army is no longer an audience that can be silenced with press statements. They are observers who have grown with the members. They know when a smile is genuine and when it is hiding a wound. They know when the voice is vibrating because of emotion, not because it is playing a high note. And right after the statement was issued, Jimin did not perform for 2 weeks. When he finally returned to the Japanese radio show, his facial expression was completely different. Pale, his voice is slow, and his eyes often look dreamy. In a segment that was supposed to be light, he even threw a sentence that made all the listeners freeze. Sometimes, even the closest people can feel distant if you don't hug them. This sentence hit like a bullet. Is this about Jungkook? Is there an explicit prohibition on keeping your distance, even when someone is injured? Some people in the Korean entertainment industry began to raise their voices implicitly. They say that such a scenario is not new. Many idols are secretly pressured to limit their personal closeness if it is considered contrary to the direction of marketing or the image of the group. One former music program producer even said in a closed-door interview that any emotional attachment that the agency can't control is a threat. And if so, are Jungkook and Jimin already considered a threat to BTS's grand narrative?